Good morning or good afternoon. This is We Lead Live. I'm Allie Brown. Today I am broadcasting from Scottsdale, Arizona, and I'm here with Brandi Bernoskie. Where are you located, Brandi?
I'm in New Jersey, just outside of New York City.
In New Jersey. So we're coast to coast. And what this series is I'm bringing in some brilliant women whose businesses have reached the multiple 7, 8 figures. And we are going to be talking with them on what they did to first grow the business, then what they've been doing this year to adjust what they're doing if it's needed. And also just anything else we can learn from them. And why I wanted to bring these women in is to share real stories that are not just inspirational, not just feel good, but these are women who've truly built companies that are helping a lot of people, making an impact, and also designed around their gifts and their genius. So we're going to be every Monday and Thursday for the next few weeks at this time, noon Eastern and 9 Pacific. And we're having fun. And I like having a schedule because you know why? It's making me do this, Brandi. I'm not good at spontaneous lives, although I did one from the car last week about the whole school situation on Instagram if you all want to see it. But I want to start off first by talking a bit about, well, let me introduce you the current state of your business properly, because I just want to give you a big shout out that Brandi is extremely humble and modest. It's very hard to pull out of her how much she has really created. But she is founder and CEO of Alchemy and AIM web company and a new company called Northstar Sites. And she has designed and developed sites for major luminaries such as Brene Brown, Allie Brown. I have to throw myself in there. For Kate, what was the other one?
Kate Northrup.
Kate Northrup, Judy Smith, who I just realized Scandal was based on. Thank you for sharing that with me. Just some major people. So she has an advantage she's bringing today also in the scope of what's really in demand right now for web, what we should be looking for when we're looking to develop our next websites, and generally kind of what's going on in the industry. So Brandi, I'd love, actually, your background's so interesting that I kind of forgot about. You have a background in theater philosophy and physics. So can we start there? It's a little unusual.
Yeah, it is a little unusual. My intention when I went away to college was to be an actor. And I was actually so I went to New York University in 1998. That was the plan, be an actor. And things kind of shifted for me a little bit. And I feel like the world shifted when September 11th happened. And I was in New York City. I was downtown in Washington Square Park in a class. And it kind of gave everyone a moment of like, wait, what's actually happening? And am I using my gifts the way I should be using them? So I loved theater and I still love it to this day. And it has given me so.
Did you want to be on Broadway or movies?
Yeah, I loved Shakespeare. So I wasn't in musical theater. I was actually doing a lot of what we would call straight plays, things that don't have songs in them. But I do have a background in singing, so it sometimes worked itself into shows. And I loved this thing of getting into a character and understanding someone who was unlike you and their motivations and what drives them. And that's something that I've carried forward with me, like understanding motivation and why we do what we do and how that influences the world around us, and how the world around us influences us. So really, I adored it. And it was kind of funny because I was like that one actor who was responsible enough, and the other actors were like, oh, and you're also going to produce our plays and help direct them too. So
don't you hate that?
They
made you the boss.
Yeah, they did. They made me the boss early on because they knew I was going to get it done. And so it was kind of, I think I had a brief stint right around the time I was like 21, where a friend like the two of us started a theater production company, and we put on a couple of shows together. And then I ended up moving out of the city and doing other things. So it was just kind of, it happened and very unexpectedly. So the physics was always there since I was in high school. It kind of, I studied it in college, but didn't do much with it until I decided to go back for a second degree. And I just kind of kept following my curiosity, honestly. Like, I did not totally know what was going to happen or that I'd be here today. I just kept saying, like, what am I interested in, and going after that thing. And it's all come in so useful.
So how did the development come then? How did the web development happen?
So physics actually gives you a really solid background in like code that you have to understand in order to like, I was using a report called a software called LaTeX to code my lab reports. So it was like, I understood code and I started blogging. I was just, honestly, I was blogging to flirt with a guy at work first in one of my jobs. And then I was blogging just to blog and just to share things that I loved. And next thing I knew, I was making friends on the blog. And I kind of had just enough knowledge to start playing with my own site. And that's really what it came from. Like I spent probably 2 years of just playing with my own site, trying to figure things out. And friends noticed what was happening. And they asked me to start coding their sites for them. You know, like sometimes it was a little help, sometimes it was bigger. And I would say maybe like, it was about 4 years after I started coding that I realized it was, you know, I was good enough at it that I could potentially do it, you know, full time. So my thought was, oh, I'll be a freelance developer. It'll get me out of this cube. Liked the role I had in the company at the time, but I just felt so confined. And especially like in the winter time where it's like you get up and it's dark and you get to work and it's dark and you leave and work and it's still dark. And it just felt like,
I remember that. New England, especially.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It was something else. So, so I knew I needed to just make a change and had just enough clients, had started working with a designer and I was coding themes for her that I figured, you know what? This is my time. Like I am not married. I do not have children to support, you know, like everyone in my family is healthy. What's the worst thing that could happen?
Right.
Is that I have a pet? My parents.
Did you have a pet at least?
I did. I had 3 cats at the time. So I did.
But that's the time to do this. I want to emphasize, like, you know, when I remember when I made that move in New York too, and I was in that last job in New York City and decided like, I'm just going to go for this. I'm young, single, have no kids, no pets, no problem. Like I have no money. There's only one way to go, and it's up. And it's a great, you know, I tell the women, especially in their 20s and stuff, this is the time to do crazy stuff. Like take the leap, start the business, make the shift, because I mean, it's the time you typically have the least to risk, right? As we get older now, there's like a little more weight to the decisions we make, you know, as I'm homeschooling kids in the living room today. So now that's a big shift. When did you make the shift to then being business owner and saying, you know what, this is a company and I'm building a team, and what was happening?
You know, so I don't think that even happened immediately. Like it was about 1.5 years into being a freelance developer that I realized I had so much work I needed to hire someone. And so I hired an assistant and 2 developers to work with me. I still thought of myself as a freelance developer. It really wasn't, I'd say until about 6 months after my first hires that I realized my role was beginning to shift a little bit and that I couldn't solely be responsible for development. I had to see things a little differently. So that's when I really kind of started to reorient my sense of self as not only freelance developer, but also, this is actually a business, this is a company. And I think it was when I named Alchemy Name, because prior to that, I had just been working as Brandi Bernoskie. Like, you need to just go to my website, Brandi Bernoskie, it's all there. And the admin assistant I had hired said, you know, it's weird. I tell people, like, you've got this great thing you've created, and I'm telling people I work for Brandi Bernoskie, they don't know what that is. Like, it just sounds odd. And I really think it came like when I decided to name it, that it created this, you know, I am Brandi Bernoskie, founder of Alchemy Name now. And it became this other thing.
Yeah. When did you start attracting the big clients?
Early on, a very fortunate, I would say, you know, Brene Brown became a client just before I even hired anyone, like just as I was beginning to name it.
Wow.
And that just came from past connections. Like the blogging, I will say the blogging world really set me up well. And a lot of the people I knew through blogging have become clients, or we've worked together in some capacity. And in that case, it was someone I met at a blogging conference. Wow. She started her own design agency and attracted Brene unexpectedly as a client, and then eventually reached out to me for the development support. So it was completely unexpected and wonderful. And that's kind of how it's all kept going. It's just all through these wonderful relationships that I have with people.
I want to point out that the interesting thing, because, and disclaimer, that Brandi's done my site, right?
Yes.
And you were one of the few people I know that you could call and like you're the master at development, but you feel out someone's brand and what they want to create, and then you match with a designer who matches what they want to create, right? And that's the advantage of going more with a company or team versus just hiring, your cousin Joe's friend, the web guy, right? So you talk about a bit about pitfalls to avoid when you're looking to really up level your brand, like not just throw together a little site, but really like, okay, this next site needs to represent not only where I am now, but where I'm going to be 5 years from now. Like, how do we even think through that and who to hire?
Yeah, I think, the beginning is actually just starting to think through those questions for yourself. So I spend a lot of time with our clients just understanding like, what are their goals? Where are they heading? Because so often in that, I hear some of the foundations for the technology that they need. So people don't always expect that, but I'm looking for that. Like I'm looking for those pieces. So I would say like getting clear on what you want and what your vision is, not to say it can't change or shift. And then working with someone to even help pull it out of you a little bit more, like the strategies. That's what I do now. Like I don't develop anymore. I really focus in on the strategy, and then I'm spending time going, okay, now who's the designer? And we have a fantastic network of designers we work with, and they all have their special, thing about them. Their process is a little different. Their aesthetic is a little different, and how they relate to clients is a little different. And I'm always looking for that. I'm like, where's the magic going to happen?
Yeah.
Cause it has to be part of a bigger picture. And you have to think more in terms of team rather than like, oh, I'm going to hire a guy who says he knows how to do everything. And, I'll get it done cheap. Like this is a time to just invest in the bigger picture. And that doesn't mean you have to spend a ton of money. It just means you need the right partners.
I need to interject too. And I had not really realized how important the development side of all this was, because, we had this site that had just grown and grown and grown and like was kind of its own thing. And then, you don't know what you don't know as the entrepreneur or CEO. You have this site and there's people working on it, and it's apparently, everything's working. It's fine. You don't know what's behind the curtain. And then, we let someone like you in, you guys are like, whoa, like you go in the back and you're like, this is a mess. And like, we're going to rebuild this so solid that, the nice thing, can you talk about the importance of development and how otherwise it's kind of a house of cards? Like if you go with a very cheap program or a designer who doesn't know how to develop, right? Yeah. There's a lot of those. And yes, there's templates and things they could use, but if you're trying to up your game, it's not going to work.
Yeah. If you're trying to up your game, you really need to find a way to stand out, and it's not going to be with the theme that everyone else is using. That's the reality of it. For me, having been a blogger and having been there and worked on, I remember some of the first themes that I used on my site, just trying to figure that out. I'm like, this makes no sense. I have to create a page and label it this in order for it to feed into the sidebar in this way. I'm like, this is just weird. So one of the things that I've always strived to do as a developer myself, and now, we as a team do, is really create like a really intuitive backend for people to use. That's streamlined, simple, straightforward. And it's kind of like when you start a business, it's, it's kind of like you build like a one-room house, and then you're adding on all of these additions to the point where it kind of starts to feel like the Winchester house, where there are like doors that don't go anywhere and windows that, open onto like an inner courtyard or a wall or something like that. So it really, I think it's a really important thing to do, is to kind of like take a step back and say like, what do we really need? What do we have that we don't need anymore? What do we need to keep? And really just streamline it and make sure that it functions well. Because as you're adding on and adding on and adding on, you're probably creating like little glitches or, things that you don't need, or things that you needed at one point and then abandoned. And it's just from a bigger functionality perspective and a growth perspective, it's like, like reorganizing your office, and you're like, oh my God, I have so much more space. And then now I know where everything is, and it's going to work better. And I'm going to work better because I know all of this.
Yeah. I'm going to give a tip too to anyone listening. If you're thinking about doing a new site and you're really overwhelmed, especially with the content, which I was, and at the same time, you're creating new, because it's not just the site. You're suddenly having to think through your brand and your strategy, and like it's the weight of these decisions can be so heavy. So what helped me is, I decided to cross off a bunch of pages. I'm like, what's the bare minimum we need right now on this site that looks good, gets people the information they need. We had to make sure we had the show. Like Glambition Radio was the number one thing we had to do and really focus on that worked, right? But otherwise, it was a lot of information, some forms. It wasn't too crazy. And so I narrowed it down to that. And that helped me so much move forward, because otherwise I was thinking we needed this huge site. And I didn't have the bandwidth to make these decisions at this point or write new copy first. Because it goes like this, like, okay, we need a speaking page. Great. So you go back and grab the old copy. You're like, oh, this feels old. I need to redo it. So then you start redoing it. Then you're like, oh my God, my reel needs to be updated. And so it adds all these other things that you delay the site. So I'm encouraging you all, like, I've done this with clients too. If the redoing the whole site now feels scary or too big, you can do kind of a bridge site, or I've had clients even do just a beautiful cover page with like a mysterious kind of message, or just to feel energetically aligned with where they are. So I just want to emphasize that too. You were helpful in that when we kept going through the process, we decided, I think together, to just say, listen, this can all be phase 2 next year, when I have the personal space to really think through what I want to say on these pages. Is that, now that was just kind of me and my client, but like, does that happen often? Do clients get stuck in the process?
They do. They think a lot of clients think they need to figure it all out now and do it all now. Like, I've even had clients come to me and they're like, okay, so I'm going to want to blog in 6 months. So I need to build it now. And I'm like, great. Have you recorded any episodes? No, I'm not building you a blog or a podcast page or anything. I'm not doing anything if you haven't actually started down that path. We can build it at that time. So I really encourage a lot of the clients we work with to consider phased approaches of like, what is the minimum viable thing that we need to put out in order, in order for that alignment to happen again, for that realignment to happen, so that you're putting into the world what you want the world to see. And then saying, yeah, let's tackle that phase when we get to it. Like when it makes sense. Like even some people, sometimes they'll have like, let's say a sales page for an event, and the event is, 8 months from now. We don't need to redo it as part of the phase 1 of the project. We can do it in a couple months. It's like everything. It's an evolution and it's an iterative practice. And you have to go back to it and just add on what you need when you need it. And then kind of take a step back and evaluate what's happened.
Yeah. I love that. MVP, it's your minimum viable product. If you're not familiar with that, it's really used in the tech industry a lot, but it's really getting out, what do you absolutely need right now? And then what can be phase 2, phase 3, just map it out when you're going to get to those things. Now you made a big decision over the past year to start a separate company or division of your company for a specific reason. And this was a big evolution for the growth of, the impact you have and the scope of your clients. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So we had been running what I like to call like smaller, like starter sites within Alchemy AIM for, I would say 3 or 4 years. I really I always seek to help people no matter where they are in their entrepreneurial journey. So, but what I kept noticing is that there was this kind of like miscommunication, disconnect, misplaced expectations along the way. And in some cases, I wasn't really giving them what they needed, because I had a process that was really designed for custom websites and the clients I needed to go really deep with to figure out what they needed. So it made so much sense to me all of a sudden to be like, wait, why don't I create a sister company? And that's kind of how Northstar was born. So Northstar Sites really is all about like creating a really elegant website that either as a starter site or like sometimes a great next phase site for a lot of people that works off of a pre-made theme that we've created for WordPress. It's really, really flexible. And I kept thinking through, like, what do these people need? Like these people need, not what do my custom clients need? So there's levels of education that are happening. We have like a whole vault full of like how-to videos so that they feel really comfortable and confident using what we've created for them.
Is this self-service? Is this like a self-service thing, or do you still help them?
We still help them. We still do. We actually do a planning call with them. We do a strategy call with them. And then they have like, during a week period, they have time with our team to actually like build out their site. So they're not totally abandoned. They don't have to figure it out all themselves, but they get the foundation that they need. And then they can keep building from there if they choose to build on their own, or they can come back to us and we'll help them. Like, for me, I'm always trying to create that right solution for where people are.
Yeah, that's great. When you look over the last year, was your business that impacted or not really?
I would say, with quarantine and everything that's happened, it's been impacted not necessarily in the financial ways, but in how we've worked with clients has changed. So really, we only had one project reschedule because of the quarantine. Like they just needed to address things internally first.
Yeah.
But a lot of our clients, what I love seeing is we got deeper with a lot of our clients because they were looking at how do I shift my business to better serve our clients. And sometimes that meant that people that they once required to do things in person now had to do them online, and that they needed to provide different resources. So I was just watching, like that's been kind of like our shift, is that we've gone a little deeper with our clients, and we've seen them shift their businesses a little bit more. And I feel like it's shifted my business too, because I love going deep with people. And that's actually been, as I've considered my own growth of like, how do I want to grow this company? Because there's the obvious way, which is hire more people, build more websites. But it doesn't interest me as much as going deeper with people. So I've started kind of like creating new scenarios and partnerships with even some of our clients to better support them as they grow and scale. And that allows us to grow and scale in the process too.
Yeah. Can you, I've known you for a few years now, and I think, did we first meet at one of my events? Was it Iconic?
We did. Yep.
Yeah.
Iconic.
And and then Brandi's like, oh, I'm a web developer. I'm like, oh my God. And I find out about her business. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I think she just wanted to be not, very discreet in the background. I'm like, you have to tell people about what you're doing. It's amazing. So you've been a lot more active the last 2 years, I'd say, in partnerships, doing bigger deals, things like that. Can you talk about like the focus and even it's interesting to look back in your career, your connection and connections were how you got the job with Brene Brown, right?
Yep.
So as you've elevated your business and yourself, tell me more about your network and relationships and how that's become even more important.
Yeah, I will say that's been everything from day one, really. But I think especially in the past few years, it's really become a question of like, who do I want to work with? Like who are these amazing people doing great things in the world that I want to support, and how do I get myself in the room with them? And that was one of like the biggest reasons I joined the Trust, was because like that's just a room full of kick-ass women entrepreneurs who are really building their businesses and thinking about business differently too. Like this is not just like, oh, we have a business and we're just going to grow it and it's all about money or scale. Like these are women who are looking to make an impact with what they do. And that is what drives me. Like I just want really to help people amplify the impact that they have. So it made so much sense for me to kind of become part of that and to be in that room and to be among my peers and, women I admire and to see what I can do to support them. So it's like, it's great because, I've actually started to work with a few of them. One of them, she and I are actually developing a company together, which we're both really excited about. I did not see that coming at all for 2020. Like,
and I heard that through the grapevine. I'm like, what? They're like, oh yeah, Brandi started a company with her. I'm like, what? What's going on? It's just amazing. Yeah,
it really is. It's kind of opened up like all these possibilities that I just didn't see before. And frankly, like I've now started like kind of 2 businesses on my own. It's really exciting for me to co-create with someone else and to really actually hold myself to the CEO role too. Like, this is not down and dirty. Let me get my hands in and do the work. This is, no, I'm going to be visionary and leader of this company. We're going to do this together. And we're going to look for the right team to really run it for us.
That's a good point in that I hadn't even thought of that in describing, because people do ask me like, who are these women in the Trust? And, one thing I will say that you don't get the solopreneur types that you would typically get at other events. These are women who have truly built businesses. They have teams. They also have the issues that you have running teams. They have the same challenges in growth. Some of them want to scale their business to have an exit relatively soon. So it's just a different level conversation. I'm going to give a quick slide here with the URL. If you're listening to this right now and you are in a current business with revenues in the 7 or 8 figures, take a look at this. It's jointhetrust.org. I put this together to create something different. And what I saw the need for was a truly modern women's network, not the biggest in the world, but the tightest group of women that we could create something magical together. And we have just live events coming up. We have virtual events. There'll be a virtual option in case you have to quarantine, Brandi. We're just discussing all the rules right now, what's going on. So we have options for everybody, but I'll tell you what's amazing. Most of the women are coming. Most of the women are coming to the live event we have in September. And they're just like, listen, we'll drive, we'll parachute in, whatever it takes. We're just desperate to be around each other and, put on some real clothes and have a great meeting. And of course, we'll be honoring local guidelines, whatever, it changes day to day. We'll see whatever it is, we'll work with it. But man, we need a margarita. Like we just need to sit down together and talk about everything going on. Zoom's been great, but it's just not the same. But we're also going to have an amazing virtual option. I'm actually going to bring in a professional team of videographers. We're going to have a whole virtual platform for the women who can't fly or don't feel safe flying right now. That's totally fine. So we're taking care of everybody. There's so many more benefits. So I want to spend more time on this, but if you do qualify and you'd like to hear more, jointhetrust.org is where you want to go. And Brandi, last thing I'd like you to share is when you see what's trending now and in the future. I remember just like when I was creating a site, even in 2014, for example, I saw all the big images were just starting, like everyone's like, you need a big image of yourself at the top of the site. And those are still, they seem to be around, there's video, there's imagery. Do you see that changing? What are some other trends that you see as far as what sites need to look like and do?
Yeah, so there's a few things. One is simplicity. There's so much happening in this world right now that we want to feel, we want to feel guided and like we're in the right space. So, those old nav bars with like 40 options on them that like you can't even sort through
and all the drop downs. Yeah, I go crazy. Yeah, too much.
So it's really about, focus, simplicity. What do you want people to do on your site? You don't want them just to be on your site. You want them to take action of some sort, connect with you, buy from you, something. So I really think, simplicity is key. Really, the other piece is, accessibility and diversity. Like this is, and that kind of goes to a bigger company perspective and business perspective too. But I really think that sites that are not accessible and ADA compliant are doing a disservice to people. And we're seeing how important, like that's just a huge conversation that's happening right now around like inclusion. And if you are excluding a subset of the population, or I think it's just really important to be aware of it and to take whatever practices you can into making your site more accessible for everyone to use, whether they're colorblind or if they're using an e-reader or whatever it might be. I think people need to feel welcome. And
a good developer will help you do that, right?
Yeah.
Like we shouldn't even have to, ideally, I think when we were working together, you brought that up saying, oh, we're doing these, because I was asking about something. Oh, you're like, we do this because of this. I'm like, oh, that's great. That's great that you thought of that. I'm just wrapped up in like what this is going to say right now. I haven't even thought of that. Yeah. So that's when you're working with someone great. So Brandi, thank you so much. Any last words of advice for everybody, where they could follow you and where they can learn more if they're like, oh, this is the gal I want to do my website?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at Brandi Bernoskie or at Alchemy Name. Obviously, if you want to have a chat with me, please do. alchemyname.com. You just head to the contact page and that goes to me. So I love having conversations with really awesome people and just making sure that they get the right support in the world. Maybe I'm not that person, but maybe I can refer to the right person always.
Yeah.
And
Brandi, thank you so much. Yeah. Take care. See you soon, hopefully, virtual or live. Okay. Bye, everybody. We'll see you back on today's Thursday. Yeah. So we'll see you back on Monday, same time,